Welcome one, welcome all to this. It's Season 10, Episode 40 of the Ubuntu podcast. In this episode, we're going to discuss Linux Steam integration. We'll also have some multiplayer love and go over your feedback. I'm Mark, and joining me this week, as ever, are Martin.
Hola.
And Alan.
What?
What indeed. Alan, what have you been doing?
I bought some gaming hardware. Yes. Nothing like as expensive as, and nothing that will improve my gaming. Well, maybe a tiny bit, but nothing like the super swanky 3D video cards and stuff that Martin's been buying with his infinite supply of bitcoins. I have bought a new mouse and a keyboard.
Is it a weird angular gaming mouse with lasers and all sorts?
It's got some relatively sharp edges, but more importantly, it's got a glowing LED in it. Well, two glowing LEDs. One of them stays on and the other one is kind of like pulsating up and down. I kind of found myself playing quite a lot of games recently, and I was using a Microsoft, what on earth is this thing? One of those wireless mice. It's quite comfy, and I've used it okay. It takes one AA battery, but I don't know, it just felt uncomfortable after a while. So I wanted a new mouse, so I treated myself to a Razer something Death Adder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
MLG, man.
I know, right? Whatever that means. And it's got precision some numbers that I can't read because my eyesight's going, but some high DPI, which is really good apparently for gaming. And also, more importantly, a keyboard which has LEDs under it, which have various modes. You can either have them all on all the time. They're rainbow coloured, so they kind of go from red down to blue at the bottom. But you can also have it in a mode where every time you touch a key, a light, the LED emanates out from that one through all the others. Yeah, like a ripple through the whole keyboard. Or you can have it just ripple along the line that key is in. And that's really important for really good gaming, high performance, frames per second and all that.
Also really important if someone's sitting next to you and they want to tell what you've just typed as your password.
Yeah, maybe, I guess. So Sam often sits next to me when he's playing a game, and he's got a kind of, in inverted commas, mechanical keyboard, or like a decent keyboard. And so the noise coming from this room when the pair of us are playing with these clacking keys going, and the ridiculously loud micro switches in this mouse as well. But yeah, it's quite nice. It's my first ever mouse that has more than the usual number of buttons. It's got 2 buttons where your thumb goes, and I honestly don't know what to do with them. One of them, they're on a desktop, one goes back and one goes forward. So if you're in a browser, you can go back and forward. And in a game, I have it set to push to talk, so I can talk to the people I'm playing with, so I don't have to find another key on the keyboard.
I sometimes use them for switching weapons or items or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But unfortunately, I still have it set to push to talk. And when I come out of the game, I find myself still wanting to push to talk to people and pressing back in my browser all the time, which is really infuriating.
Is that what's going on when we're on video conferences?
When you're talking...
I've just worked it out. Okay, that's brilliant.
When you see me disappear out of a hangout, it's because I've pressed the back button.
Marvellous.
Oh
dear.
So that's great. What I've been doing.
Great. Well, thank you for updating us, and on with the show.
So joining us this episode, we have Ikey Doherty from Solus and other podcasts. Hello, Ikey. Can you hear us? Hello, Ireland. How are you doing?
It was raining here, but we're not too bad.
Good. Now, the reason that we've asked Ikey to join us this evening is that he's been, for some time now, working on a project called Linux Steam integration. And more recently, you've been doing some work with that and Snaps. And it sounds like magical voodoo stardust. So the first question, Ikey, is what is Linux Steam integration?
I mean, if I had to describe it using any random word in the universe, I think I would have to go with magical stardust. So
That'll do.
yeah, I mean, it's a weird project that tries to get around a lot of library and environment related issues in games by making them work with your libraries and not libcurl from 2015 or some library from 2002, which doesn't work anymore. So it's like a distro helper to make games actually work, so you don't cry at the stuff you've bought on Steam.
Okay, so let's rewind. I don't often cry at Steam other than when people shoot me in games and I didn't see them coming because I didn't have a good enough mouse and keyboard, right? But I think maybe this is solving a problem some people didn't know they had, right? So Steam on Ubuntu, people install the Steam deb and some stuff happens and a dialog box pops up and more stuff happens and then they get some games and they run the games, right? But what they might not realize is what's going on under the hood. And you talked about old libraries. What libraries are you talking about and where did they come from?
Yeah, so good question. The so-called coveted Steam runtime originally started off for Ubuntu 12.04, which by anyone's standard now is very old. There's a lot of those old libraries that are sitting in that runtime now. For a lot of people, if you're running, say, like Ubuntu, like the 14 series, and you're running NVIDIA, for the most part, you're probably not affected. If you use any open source driver, you know about it, because loads of your games won't start up because you have to go into the runtime directory and start deleting loads of files just to make it work again, which isn't fun. So
I definitely remember having that on 1404 at one point.
So when those dialog boxes pop up in Steam, they're going and getting libraries not from the Ubuntu repository, but a bundle of libraries that Valve put together and labeled the Steam runtime, right? And they came from the past.
yeah, that basically it's a TARDIS of tears.
Awesome. So you have what? Have you created an up-to-date tarball with newer libraries? How does this manifest itself?
Okay, so the way the LSI originally was supposed to work was it does the whole thing of turning the Steam runtime off, which is like Steam runtime equals 0 in the environment. That's part of it, but it's had to get to the point where it now has to technobabble starts now for about 4 seconds. It overrides the dynamic linker and tells it which libraries it can use on the system, and now we stop the technobabble.
So I didn't even know that environment variable existed, that Steam Runtime 0. So what that says is don't use these shonky old libraries that you downloaded from Valve. Use whatever the system provides you.
Yeah, in theory.
Unless Ikey does some magic that overrides the libraries that... Yes?
Yeah, it is kind of like that. So that tells Steam, for the most part, not to use its own libraries, even though it still kind of does, like using its own SDL. One of the famous examples of the bug there is you can't do full screen videos in the client. That's actually because of the version of SDL they're shipping has a build issue. Yeah, there's lots of little weird ones like that, but the games themselves don't care about your environment variable. So like, yeah, no, I'm still going to ship this version of C++ from 2008 because it will work. No, it won't. So it goes even further and it overrides all those guys as well.
And it's part of this problem because game developers, like, for them, Linux is not a massive target market, and the effort that they've got to go in to update all these libraries is too much. And so you're working around that lack of effort on their part.
I wouldn't really call it a lack of effort on their part as such, because at the end of the day, what they're having to do is doing the distro dev's job all over again every single time, right? And that kind of sucks for them. So they'll have a version porting kit. So like these are the stable versions of these libraries that we will use. They mightn't be up to date or secure, but this is the porting kit we're using for this game. It has these blah, blah, blah soul names, and we'll use those. And that's to get around like the little differences between different distros. Like this guy has that OpenSSL, but they're weird over there, and they have LibreSSL. And so you get these standard bundled libraries, and like a game maker will bundle a load of libraries with it, even if it doesn't need them. So like it's kind of overkill, but where LSI started out doing that distro work, a lot of it was actually done in the Solus repo itself, by making sure that we provided the compatibility, we had the patches, we had all the right libraries in place to make sure it will work. So there's 32-bit and 64-bit you got to worry about. But then it gets to the point, it's like, that's all good for Solus, but it doesn't really help anyone else unless they want to go and do all of that distro work again, which... yeah.
So really the origin story of this is you as the distro maintainer for Solus don't like having these shonky old libraries. You would rather have a better experience for your users. So you fixed it in Solus first, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was making them run better and actually not die.
Right.
So in terms of how you use this, who is this aimed at? Is this aimed at Linux enthusiasts or anyone that wants to play games on Linux? And how do they use these tools?
Right, so up until very recently, it's been you kind of use Solus. That was the only real way to get a hold of LSI. What we're doing now is exporting all of that work, all of the repo side, like all of the libraries bundled up. It's effectively replacing the entire Steam runtime by not having a host runtime at all. It's just like a single runtime and LSI and Steam in snaps. So the idea will be that anyone who wants to use Steam on Linux will just install the snaps and not have to do anything on the host or worry about all these compatibility issues, and let someone with a serious case of OCD sort it out instead.
That's you, right?
Yeah, that would be me.
Just to be clear,
yeah.
Right. Okay.
So is there a sort of a constant game of catch-up to be played to actually make sure that the LSI includes everything that any game you might install is going to need? Or is there a sort of a base layer which you know that as long as it's got all these things, then whatever comes along will run?
I mean, for the most part, there's commonality to the porting kits that are used.
Yeah.
And then after that, it becomes a case of like, if a soul name changes, make sure that we provide that compatibility. And what we started doing, because as far as I know, I might be wrong, but I think we've got the first published base snap in the Steam, in the Snap Store.
You do.
Steam Store, Snap Store. Steam in the Snap Store. Yeah, so we've actually started tracking the ABI of the entire runtime, which is a text file. Each one is like 5 megabytes, which actually just lists the entire ABI of that runtime. So we can track the changes as well.
Okay.
It's not too much of an effort. I mean, we've got most of the common areas sorted out, and the way that it works, it's got 2 modes. If it's the Steam client, so it checks what process is actually running. That's the sort of granularity that's in there now. So if it's the Steam client, it's on a whitelist process. It's only allowed to load certain libraries. So the Steam client will actually load up. Everything else has to come from the system. Then for the games, they're on a blacklist process. So it's like these these all cause problems. Don't do this. This is stupid. Like loading libstandard C++, right? We don't allow anyone to vendor that, or SDL, or any of those libraries. But because it's only a blacklist, if they start to put something new that wasn't actually yet accounted for by the runtime, it still would go through until such time as we've evaluated it and say yes or no.
Right. So I'm like normal user, and I do whatever voodoo I need to do to get your magic on my machine, and I run it, and I get Steam. I'm thinking about this from like Joe user point of view. I'm running Steam, and the libraries that Steam uses are being provided by LSI or the Solus base snap. And then I installed some game from a few years ago, and it happens to ship with some libraries that actually you've got newer versions of in the Solus base snap. So I use those, and I have a happy time playing that game. Then brand new bleeding edge AAA title comes out, and Ikey Doherty happened unfathomably to be asleep at the time. and they have newer versions of libstd C++ or whatever, it would still work, but it would use the library that came with the game rather than the one that's in the... So, no?
It absolutely blacklists loading, vendoring of libstandard C++. It's not allowed.
So it would still use the one that you shipped in the Solus base Snap.
Yeah, so
right?
you got two operational modes. I mean, the first shocking thing, I was asleep. The second thing is I got a C in my name at the same time. It's all kinds of scary stuff happening here, man. But you have sorry, I had to. You got two operational modes. One is Steam, right, and that's where we just we blacklist everything, and you're allowed these certain libraries to come through. The other one is called Vendor Offender. It's literally what the mode is called. It's like in capital letters and everything. It's like LSI intercept vendor offender. And it's brilliant, right? But it looks at the actual library soul name. So this is happening at the dynamic linker level, like in glibc land. glibc goes to load a library because it's linked to it, and it actually basically has to ask permission from our library first. That's sort of the way it works. It goes to it, it's like, I want this soul name, and then LSI is like, no, sorry, mate, no. And it just like doesn't allow it to happen. To give an example of one of those, so LibreSSL, Solus cannot use LibreSSL. We use OpenSSL, right? That provides the libSSL name. We've actually done a magic trick where we ship it as libSSL-LibreSSL, and at runtime, we force any request for libSSL back to the different soul name. So it was never linked against that library in the first place, but we can still do on the fly redirection to the other library to make sure it's using a secure version of the SSL library, because you're connecting to the internet and giving your credentials. It's probably a good idea to have a working SSL library.
Right.
So now, as I understand it, in order to use these two snaps, there are two snaps right now. There's one for the Linux Steam integration itself, and there is another that provides the base snap that is all of your hot source libraries that are Solus optimized versions as well. But we currently require, as we record this, a version of snapd from master. But let's just assume the new version of snapd is released. What do I have to install on my system in order to use this?
Just the snaps.
And what are those snaps called?
So the first one is Solus Runtime Gaming, which you'll have to install that first, because at the moment snapd doesn't automatically grab the base snap. It would just complain. So it'd be like a sudo snap install --edge solus -runtime -gaming.
Yep.
And then afterwards it'd be sudo snap install --edge --dev mode, because we've not yet got the confinement sorted out. I'm sorry. Linux Steam integration. Then it'll appear in the menu, or you can just run Linux Steam integration from the terminal.
And when I run Linux Steam integration, does that install Steam?
Ish. It's kind of weird. So it's Steam itself within that is packaged up much like it would be on a distro. And then the first time it runs, it will install Steam to what it believes to be its home directory.
Yep.
Which this is actually namespaced under the snap tree itself, and we made it sure that it persists between upgrades. But it will install itself. You'll get the usual license prompt, get the dialogue, blah 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 blah. Because we don't actually modify Steam itself. That's an important note to make. Steam itself is completely vanilla. So you go through that, but the difference is it's running through the LSI environment. So that's all set up to allow things like Vulkan to work, and to allow the host NVIDIA drivers to be visible to the snap, that sort of stuff.
So have you spoken to anyone from Valve about this maybe being a future more vanilla Steam experience, like this being the way to install Steam, if it's a better way of doing it on Linux?
Nah.
No. Okay.
I mean,
given it's not even possible to install it yet, I think that may be
a little bit
running before we
premature,
walk slightly.
I mean, they've been looking at their own stuff for, I think, last couple of years, and at one point they were looking at Flatpak not to actually distribute Steam, but I think there was more interest in stuff like bubble wrap in terms of sandboxing the games themselves.
Right.
Whereas this approach is basically put everything in a big box and tie it up. because I can't modify Steam itself, right?
Yeah, and this has a happy side effect as well, which is by and large, games on Steam do install themselves into directories that are under the Steam runtime control, but there are some that don't adhere to that and they spray files liberally around your home directory. And by using snaps, you are actually pushing everything under a single tree. And this new relocation of home means that all of your Steam games are in one place. So it becomes easy to actually sort of take a backup of all of your Steam stuff and move it, on reinstalls rather than having to download hundreds of gigabytes of games over and over.
Well, there is another nice side to this as well. So if you do run open source drivers because you've got some fancy new rigged out Ryzen system, not like my peasant laptop.
Who do we know who has one of those?
So you don't actually need any of the 32-bit stuff installed on your system at all.
Oh,
that's kind of the nice side of this. So like I've actually got Ubuntu running on a laptop over there. And I did the porting work to allow Snapd to support 32-bit NVIDIA drivers over there. So that's the one exception. If you got the NVIDIA drivers, it will use the NVIDIA's like GL library from the host in there, because that's a safe bet with that it'll work. But anything else, like you just install the Snap and it wouldn't need anything from the host side. There's no cross-contamination, because this has been the problem with Steam all along, really. They went with the Steam runtime, like when they started this a few years ago. At the time, it kind of made sense, because everyone basically had the same libraries, the same ABI-ish. If they didn't, you could just pop another library in place. Then a few years came by and GCC was like, hey, that whole C++ ABI? Let's change that.
right.
Why would you do this? But that's sort of when the cracks really started to appear, and now you got to a problem now. Like, you got to a point where the mixed runtime is more of a problem than vendoring libraries itself. So if you take away any ability to have a mixed runtime on any host and just ship this self-contained system, so I'm basically going further than they did.
So ultimately, I would imagine, it's currently in the Edge channel and it needs a special build of Snapd. So your average Joe Schmo can't use this yet. I know
they can if they like PPAs.
Right. Okay. So if you get Snapd from a PPA, or
there's a Snapd Edge, Edgy or Edgers. I don't know. You guys have weird names. Forgive me.
We do.
Edgers or Edgy or Cranky Tweakers. I don't know what it is, but there is a PPA for it. And I tested that on the laptop there last night. It's got all of the commits in there. So it'll restart itself when you do like a sudo apt upgrade. And then you've got a Snapd that will now run the snaps.
So I think what would be really super useful is if we could put in the show notes some details about the PPA and the name of the snaps and the commands people run. So people who are, interested in trying this stuff out can just type these half a dozen commands and test this stuff out. And any bugs, they can throw them. I guess all this stuff is hosted on GitHub.
The main place we've got two of them. You've got like the runtime snaps repo, which is basically something is wrong with the snap. And then you've got the Linux Steam integration one, which is something is wrong with LSI. It's fairly simple. There is one known issue at the moment. Feral games, if you add a game that's on another partition at the moment, Feral games won't launch, but that's because of the base app armor confinement that already exists in Snapd. We just got to flesh that out a little bit. If it's on the same partition, i.e. in your home directory already, it will run fine. It's really, really weird. But,
And do you see this at some point in the not too distant future landing in the stable channel and the Snapd patches landing? Is this something that within the next, few weeks or months that's normal people who don't like the idea of using edge-based snaps and don't like the idea of adding PPAs would be comfortable installing on their system?
Oh, yeah. Obviously we've got to start out in Edge because, this is uncharted territory,
Absolutely, yeah.
I had never made a snap before this. Right?
It's a pretty good first snap.
What should I make for my first snap? A Solus.
It's not exactly Hello World, is it?
No, it was like Hello Repo. So that was my first snap. So The next steps are basically getting the confinement right, relocating some of the theme assets from the runtime one over into the LSI snap, just like basically distributing them properly. And the eventual goal, like within a few weeks, ideally, maybe a little bit longer, is to get onto the stable channels and then have those in lockstep with the normal Solus update process. So on the Friday, we'd have like edge updates, and then over the course of the week, we could stabilize back out. So it'd be like a week behind Solus or so. So we could just like stabilize it back onto like the stable channels over the course of each week. And it would be awesome. And they're only small as well, by the way. Like the runtime snap is 275 megabytes.
Wow.
And that's like got a whole Solus inside it. I stripped loads of it out and made it very, very friendly to Snapd, and it doesn't do anything bad to your system. It's just like a runtime.
I love the fact that with snaps, the default core image is Ubuntu based, and so on all these other distros that support snaps, there's this tiny Ubuntu runtime. But Ikey, you're fighting back, and now we're getting this little Solus runtime that's reaching out to all the other distros out there. I love this. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, if you guys want new Solus, I'm going to put a bit of Solus on your system.
Bring Solus to the party. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Ikey. That was I totally understand what you're doing now.
Yes, that's a great project, and I don't think it'll be long before this will be the way that I shall be installing Steam on my systems, and I shall help with the testing.
In Solus itself, we are not immediately, but our goal is to deprecate our existing method of installing Steam from Solus. Right. So this will be our primary method of using Steam going forward. And we want to share that with all the distros, so we don't have all this duplication between the distros trying to make this one thing work.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, then the developers will all have this fabled consistent target that if the game runs there, it's going to run on all the distros for once.
Magic.
Excellent.
Thanks for coming on, Ikey, and explaining all this magic voodoo that you do.
If you love the command line as much as we do, send us a command that will blow our minds, and we might even mention it on the show. Send your command line love to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
Time for command line love. And command line love this week is SSH Tron. I think we were sent this one by a listener from, well, I found it in the Vault of Love. And it is SSH Tron, and it's a game. It's multiplayer Tron in your terminal. All you do is type SSH, and then the hostname is shishtron.zachlatta.com, ZACHLATTA.com. And then you can play Tron with other people. And if you do it at the same time as other people, then you'll be playing against other people. If you do it all on your own with nobody else connected, then you'll be driving a motorcycle around a virtual playfield all on your own.
Yeah, but we successfully tested this with our Telegram group earlier, which is ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram, and there were many laser cycles dashing around the terminal, carving each other up.
Yes, laser cycles. That's the word I was looking for. ASCII laser cycles.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of like, you on the film they have the characters on the light cycles, and then it sort of zooms out to the arcade and you see like some dots on a screen. It's very much the dots on a screen mode of this game.
You're shattering the illusion here.
But it's
very good fun though. Yes,
it's quite hilarious. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's our command line love, SSH Tron.
We love getting your feedback. If you've got a comment about something you hear on the show, why don't you drop us an email on show@ubuntupodcast.org.
And now it's time for your wonderful, wonderful feedback. And first up, Nadramastor posted on our website.
Don't bother trying IBM Plex Mono in terminal emulators. Its legibility is outrageous. I should really stop looking around. Ubuntu Mono is, in my opinion, by far the most legible, especially if you're inclined towards smaller font sizes.
Ah, okay. So when I read that first sentence where he said, "Don't bother trying it. Its legibility is outrageous," I opened a terminal as soon as I saw that, and I'm like, "No, this is beautiful. I love it. I love the IBM Plex Mono, but I have the default set to like 12 point, so my terminal opens like pretty big on the screen. But yeah, if you shrink it down, I don't know. I've got it down to like 8 point, and it's still pretty readable, and."
You press the wrong key and mute yourself on Mumble? Is that what happens?
Yeah, maybe. Oh, God. What I actually said was that I shrink the terminal. What I did was press Control minus, and my Mumble button is Control. Shut up. I hate you all.
Next up, Stanley Armstrong tweeted us on @Ubuntu Podcast.
I'd like to thank Mark Johnson, Popey, and Martin Wimpress for speaking to my brain with a new Ubuntu podcast every week. Thank you. On #UCA Day, any link to our podcast. That's very kind of you.
What's UCA Day?
It was the Ubuntu Community Appreciation Day that happened on November the 20th, where people in the community get to thank other people in the community for their contributions to the Ubuntu project.
Well, that was nice.
Yes.
Next, David King posted on our website.
You mentioned changing routers and only using the ISP provided one, but you could use that plus your own. I use 2 routers, which results in better security. I have an ISP router connected directly to the internet, and it has its own subnet. The second router is set up with a different subnet, gets its own IP address from the first router. PCs are connected to the second router, and anything that's not a PC or similar, like my TV with apps, are connected to the first router. You can set up your PC to get an IP address from the second router, but it can not connect to anything on the first other than the internet. Any hacker who hacks into your first router or anything attached to it cannot get to your PC.
So this is kind of like setting up a demilitarized zone in your network.
Yeah.
The problem with this is I tried this kind of setup with my cable modem set in router mode and my actual router with all my stuff connected to it, but my router was still being a bottleneck and killing my bandwidth, so that was a no-go for me. Next up, Robert Orzana posted on our subreddit r/Ubuntu podcast.
Thanks for mentioning recent notifications. I've installed it on Ubuntu 18.04 and rebooted, but cannot see any icon nor any way using it. Can anyone help me? So I've not tried it on 18.04. I've only tried recent notifications on 16.04, and I use it, and you do get an icon. I don't know why you don't get an icon in 18.04.
Is there going to be some GNOME 3 or GNOME shell thing which needs to be done to get it to work?
Well, you kind of don't need recent notifications on GNOME shell because it has notifications built in, a history of notifications.
Oh, okay.
So the problem I was solving with this recent notifications app is on Unity, where notifications are ephemeral and they disappear when I'm away from my keyboard. And I like to be able to see them queued up. I don't know. I would try and test this, but I don't have an 18.04 machine handy.
Right. Next, Joe Ressington posted on our Telegram group, ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram.
As someone who has no interest in playing games, thanks for the insight on the latest episode.
Oh, he's going to love this episode.
So I find it interesting when people say they have no interest in playing games. Are these people who, are there people on the planet who play no recreational activity whatsoever?
Joe is a very serious man.
I know that. I don't know. I hear people say, they don't play games. And my wife says she doesn't play games, but I go downstairs and I catch her playing some game on Facebook or, some weird match 3 game or click things that are lined up in colours and disappear and plinky plonk sounds and all that kind of stuff. She's not playing GTA 5, but she's playing a game. And I hear people who say, oh, I don't play games, but then they actually do play something. Yeah. And I don't know. I had no idea there were people who just do not play any kind of game whatsoever. There you go.
Well, in response to people who do play games, HexDSL tweeted us and posted on our subreddit r/Ubuntu podcast.
He says, I loved all the Linux gaming talk. I can confirm that Linux is a very real option for the more serious gamers out there, smiley face. Gaming on Linux has gone from strength to strength since Steam arrived in 2012. Thankfully, we get a great deal of things to play, and those so-called AAA titles that we don't get, they're usually quite expensive to purchase, so I've got more money left for indie games, smiley face.
Yeah. And this has led to a bit of a collaboration that we're going to be doing. So the Ubuntu podcast will be doing a little podcaster YouTuber collaboration with HexDSL in the coming weeks. So look out for that.
2 for 1. No, 2 for 1. 2 for Flinching has also posted on our subreddit.
I game on Linux, just not all the time. I played through the Orange Box on the Xbox 360. And it was really fun to revisit it, plus a ton more from Valve, running on Linux when Steam put a large bundle up for sale. However, my gaming computer, while Ubuntu, is mostly used for Windows. Not because I don't want to move to Linux or my mind is made up, or because of but because of stability issues. The native support of Windows just offers stronger stability. Nobody wants to troubleshoot issues with running games when all you want to do is decompress after a long day. Thankfully, it sounds like Ikey may be presenting us with the solution you're looking for there.
Nice callback.
And I'm not doing well this week. Anders Magnus Anderson emailed to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
At least you didn't mute your own microphone. He says, in your recent cast, you had a large section on gaming on Linux. I can tell you have much luck in your experience. I was wondering if you don't mind sharing some of your setups. With that, I mean, which distro version, probably obvious which distro, external PPAs for Mesa and other tune-ups. Oh, golly.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I mentioned earlier I had some problems with libraries on 1404, but since I upgraded my Steam box to 1604, I basically just run a vanilla install with I installed Steam from the Ubuntu archive, and I installed the NVIDIA driver for my graphics card, and that's all I've done really.
Yeah, I've got a bog standard 1604 install on a laptop, which is quite beefy, to be fair. What's in this thing? A 960 GT?
960M, yeah. 980M, actually.
980M in this thing, and it's got 2 external screens plugged in, and when I play games, they run on the internal panel, and I have Discord and other chat stuff on the other displays, and it all just works. It used to be the case that I would have problems with NVIDIA. I haven't had a single problem with NVIDIA. Actually, that's not true. I will point back to something I mentioned previously, which is I have ridiculously high uptimes usually on my laptops. And I have had occasion where I've updated my NVIDIA driver just with apt, normal updates, and suddenly Steam won't launch or anything graphical won't launch. So I have to reboot. But that I kind of expect when the video driver updates while you're running the system. Other than that, never had a problem on 1604 with NVIDIA.
Yeah. I'm running the distro that shall not be named, 1804 daily, on a bunch of machines, either the Skull Canyon NUC or laptops, and I've got external graphics connected over Thunderbolt 3, so NVIDIA 1080 Ti or a yet-to-be working RX Vega 56. And on my main machine, I run with 2 panels, and I have one screen where it's fully accelerated off the NVIDIA device and another screen which is using the internal IGP. And I don't have any compatibility issues. It all just works.
And do you run any special...
No special PPAs, just everything out of the archive. Yeah.
And finally, this week, Martin Evans posted on our Facebook page in reply to Season 10, Episode 38, Soft Knowledgeable Burn.
OMG, that opening made me spit my Pepsi all over the place. Good start to the show, smiley face.
Yeah, so I went back and listened to this because we'd obviously missed it before we put the show out. Very entertaining.
Really? I don't know what that was.
No, I have no idea how that got there, but it's very amusing.
Okay, then. We'll have to go back.
Everybody needs to go back and listen to Season 10, Episode 38, Soft Knowledgeable Burn. Brilliant. Is that the end of the feedback?
That is the end of the feedback. that's all for episode 40, and what an episode it has been. We will be back next week when we'll have more news, comment and discussion, and it's our last recording of the year.
Penultimate episode.
Yeah, penultimate episode, people.
So if you want us to read anything out, you better get it in now.
Yes, and we'll have our bizarre and probably wrong predictions from last year, and we'll make some equally wrong predictions for next year. Hooray!
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Can we unshackle Ikey now and let him run back off to the wilderness?